Hi everyone, and welcome back. Today I'm going to pick up from where I left off in the last video and resurface my table. As you can see, the glue has now dried on this piece that I've inserted here. We now need to surface the table to bring this here to the same level as the rest of the table, and at the same time I also want to remove all these marks that are in the tabletop. I've set the cutter so that the blade just touches the spoil board and it's positioned in the bottom left hand corner of my table. And in Mach 3 I have opened my table leveling file. The important thing to note about my table leveling file is the Z depth here, and you'll see it's set at 0. Now it may seem strange setting that cutting height in my file to 0, but there's a very good reason for that. I don't want to have to create a new file every time I want to level my table, and I never know how much I want to cut off each time. It depends on how deep the grooves in the table surface is that I want to get rid of. So by setting my file to a constant of 0, what will determine how deep I cut is what value I assign to Z when the cutter is sitting on the table. So if I want to cut down 1 millimeter into my spoil board and surface it at 1 millimeter, all I have to do is set my cutter onto the table surface at 0, at 0, and then I'll tell Mach 3 that that cutter is sitting at 1 millimeter. That way, when it goes to cut my file, it will plunge the cutter into the surface of the material by 1 millimeter and surface the table. If I want to, in this case I want to cut 1.5 millimeters of surface off my tabletop. So I've set my cutter to the surface of the table, and now I'm going to tell it that it's sitting at 1.5 millimeters above the table. So let's take a closer look of what a leveling profile is. The white area represents my tabletop. Around this I have drawn a rectangle and then created a pocket toolpath. I have selected a 3/4 inch end mill, which I'll be using to machine the surface of the table, and set my cut depth to 0. I have also allowed a -10 millimeter pocketing allowance. This will ensure that the area cut is slightly bigger than the actual table surface itself. Don't forget to put on the dust shoe before you start this process, or you're going to have dust for miles. Here's that repair that I did earlier. You can barely make it out with the naked eye. I can just see a slight line around here. Looking here, you can see 3 repairs that I've done. Here and here are pretty obvious. These were just those grooves I mentioned earlier in my previous video, and I filled these here using a mixture of just MDF dust and PVA glue. I just mixed it up as a paste, put more glue in the hole, and just pushed it into the those cutter holes. Here is a repair that I did last year. It's only visible because the MDF is just slightly different colour to the original board. And as you can see, the table's been surfaced. It's nice and smooth. There's a few little tiny holes in it where previously I've put screws into the tabletop or what have you. But it's nice and flat now, and it's ready to accept a new top. Well, I hope that's been useful to you. As you can see, surfacing a tabletop is a relatively simple process, and especially if you do set that depth of cut to 0, you'll find you can use the same file over and over again without having to make a new file for the specific depth you want to cut at. Well, it looks like I've got a bit more to do now. I'm going to have to put a new tabletop on. I'm going to put a bit of 12mm MDF, just glue it on top. So I'll leave you to it, and I'll catch up with you next time. Cheers.